lunch? Good? Welcome to the dinosaur speech. I'll do my absolute best here to try to keep you awake. I will take a little bit of sympathy on you if you do fall asleep. I'll probably only call on you once or twice. Also have a pocket of tchotchkes here I could throw at your head, but just in case the naps settle in. What we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes, hour or so, is basically how to position yourself and effectively compete against competition that is significantly larger than you are, essentially in the same markets that you participate in. So first, a little bit about me, give you a little background here. I've been in these situations competing against larger corporations now for about 15 years or so. Way back in the 80s and the 90s or so, I was pretty tech heavy. Learned how to program in, first starting out in Visual Basic, then Apple Assembler, switched over to PC Assembler, eventually got the mainframe assembler, and I started to move back to the softer languages again. Basically spent most of the 90s kind of following the money, whether it's in web design, whether it's in programming, it's my IT, things in there. There was a real turning point in about 1997 or so, and at that time I'd gotten attached to essentially a programming body shop. It was a little boutique software house, and essentially we would bring in projects from all over the place. Very industry-specific stuff sometimes. We would write them in a variety of different languages. And I had the chance basically to do ride-alongs during the sales calls there. And one of the most interesting things that I learned there was how many of the people coming to us had problems that should, by all rights, have been solved by packaged software. For example, I'm thinking of a radio group that talked to us one time. They had a few dozen radio stations. And they had essentially gone to the typical vendor community out there with bags of money and said, essentially, we're looking for something that we can centralize all of our different radio stations on a couple of servers and drop in a data center. We're looking for something that we can basically do syndicated radio for part of the day and then drop back to local stations and have that synchronized and do time zones and all that other stuff. So you think pretty basic characteristics for an existing software package, but this is the type of need that people would come to us with on a regular basis. And that really stuck in my head at that point to indicate that regardless of the size of the vendor in there really are always going to be a few players that function more or less as dinosaurs. They're relying on an older code base. They're relying on needs of a market that perhaps has passed by and they haven't quite adapted to what's going on in the new world. So with that in mind, I started to test the waters of product development, marketing, and launches. And so there's a bunch of experiments that I did over the next 4 or 5 years. Terminal emulation was one of the things I looked at the time. I wrote a little anti-spam add-on for second-tier email servers. There was a web service that I launched to let alumni from high school connect to each other. But the one that really hit out of all of them was the strange little file transfer product that, at the time, there were already established FTP clients and FTP servers and all of that. So I wrote something that did about 10% of what those guys did. And then I charged probably about 10 times as much as they did, or in many cases more. But the reason that this particular set of products took off is because there were dinosaurs in the market where I put it in. I wasn't going to a mass market in that case. I essentially had wandered into a space where there were some old, what you call EDI players. And so folks like Sterling Commerce, you had a few other folks like Cyclone out there, guys who were charging $50,000, $100,000 for their solution. And so you could walk in there with a solution that was a couple thousand and make some hay. And basically it took them probably close to 6 or 7 years to actually react to a new competitive threat. And again, was able to basically work off of a dinosaur that existed and make money quickly off of that. And so since that time, I spent most of my time what I would call nurturing. And this is basically taking existing brands, existing products, and doing something new with them, either line extensions. This is being able to sell more to the same customer base, or taking them to a new model. And this, for example, might be taking software to a software as a service model, or trying to pick up a brand and otherwise extend it to an entirely new market. So, enough about me. Let's talk about your problems and your dinosaurs. And a couple of images up here. First of all, it's important to note that just because there's a large company participating in a space, it does not necessarily mean that they are a dinosaur. And I'm going to start basically talking about some of the ones that rule each other out here. Let's start with the little cute little creature that's up in the left hand. I guess that's a woolly mammoth. You can probably think of a very large company right now that is so beloved by the press, by its prospects, by its customers right now, that in fact it attracts fanboys. And if you know Apple and its legion of devices, that's a company that's large. It's a company though that's loved, and that makes it difficult for a competitor who wants to come in and challenge them, because there's really no huge body of disgruntled people. You know, there might be people like us who are annoyed that the iPad or the iPod's a little too hard to hack, or that it's really based on a closed source solution, but there just aren't enough of us who are willing to plunk down the money for an alternative, for a new solid product to come out. Contrast that, for example, with what you're seeing going on with the Microsoft Surface right now. On the Surface, they have essentially found a bunch of disgruntled Apple users, corporate IT folks who are annoyed that they have to install a bunch of applications on the iPad or the iPod, or that it doesn't necessarily work for all corporate environments. So they found an addressable market. That's tricky to do. For most people, you don't want to take Apple on head on. Too cute. There's also another group of large companies that typically you just basically say are too smart. These are companies that perhaps nobody loves, but they are still extremely dangerous. And for this model, think back to Microsoft back in the days of when Netscape was a viable product. And at that time, there was probably folks like me who wanted to see something new in the market. And there was really a threat that something like Mosaic plus Linux or something like that might displace Microsoft as a desktop model. It might come in there and cause massive disruption to their core business models. And so Microsoft basically put out all the stops, made sure that there was a free browser on every Windows desktop. And it did that, basically introduced IE, which was a crappy product when it first hit the market. But they dumped resources, they listened to customer feedback, they adapted quickly, they put resources in it, and very soon you had a product that was so ubiquitous and not only killed off Netscape, but it had antitrust people following Microsoft's every move. So there's an example of a competitor, probably too smart, probably way too motivated. You want to watch out for those. Now the ones that I like to compete against are the ones that basically are mean to their customers and slow to react when you start taking their customers. Can anybody think of some software companies like that in the market today?
Oracle.
That's one, and you can think of, for example, the big data movement and some of the alternative databases that are springing up all around Oracle. That's a good one. Any others?
VMware.
Who?
VMware.
Maybe. I hesitate for VMware. They do put, they might fall in my too smart category if you go up against them direct these days. But some more of the classic ones that I'm thinking of are Computer Associates. Let's say EDS from a services model. Unisys, which is a company I used to live in that ecosystem many, many years ago. These are all companies that have essentially have entrenched customer bases, not a whole lot of innovation lately, and basically you know that if you can take away a piece of it and hold on to it for a year or two, there's a good chance you'll actually be able to build on top of it. All right, it's not enough just to identify a dinosaur, of course. You have to be operating at the proper distance away from the dinosaur. So I'm going to talk about each one of these slots here briefly. Let's start with the most obvious here. If you're offering the same product for the same price in the same channels with similar ways of advertising it, it looks the same, you're basically operating right in the same space as the dinosaur. That, of course, is very bad. By definition, the dinosaur is going to win because they can do the same. They have economies of scale, they have bigger marketing budgets. They're basically going to flatten anybody who lives right in the same space. So that one's pretty obvious. You don't want to be there. The second place I'm going to talk about is a little less obvious, and that's beneath the proverbial dinosaur tail. You can, I'll let your imagination say why that's bad. But let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, think, for example, of a troop of dinosaurs, big herbivores, munching their way through the forest, destroying all the vegetation, knocking everything down in their path. And you get to be the lucky one who follows right behind it. But not only are you following right behind it, you have a whole crowd of scavengers with you, coming after the fruit that they knocked down and all the other goodies. So it's crowded, there's not much food to eat right behind it, and that's pretty horrible. Now the business analogy is that when you switch this over to buyers, you talk about who's left after the dinosaurs have sort of tramped through the market. And you're talking to people who never really had a budget in the first place. You're talking to people who are the constant complainers. You're talking to people who basically will have a problem with whatever you put out there and will try it and trash you on forums. That sort of wonderful stuff. So in general, you want to stay away from being in that spot of the market. The dinosaurs have come through, they cleaned out all the easy buyers, they cleaned out the mainstream buyers, they cherry-picked everything there. There's not much left right behind them. Now there is one exception to this rule, and you do see it occasionally, and that's if you see somebody who's in that spot and the dinosaur has let them be there. I'll give you a quick example of that from my world. Many years ago, there was a popular banking application called ITI, and individual banks would buy this application, they'd bring it in, it would run their loans, would run their checking, would run a couple of other things for them. Banks got smart pretty quickly and started to pool the resources. So let's say 10, 20, even 40 banks would get together, buy one copy of this, and basically run it as a co-op fashion. They call that a private cloud these days. They basically ran this one application in a co-op in a single data center, and then they could add redundancy, they could have 24/7 staffing, they could basically scale up around this one particular application. Now those data centers grew up to be independent businesses. They spun off as co-ops and they started to serve the banks. And then the next thing that happened is service providers came in and bought these little service providers one at a time. And it finally ended when a full competing service provider, a dinosaur if you will, named Fiserv came in and basically bought the ITI software company that was run in each one of the data centers. Now as soon as they acquired the ITI license, they shut down all of the data centers. They shut down all of the data centers except for one. And so right now there's Fiserv, let's say they have 5,000 banking customers and they have one little data center with 50. It's essentially operating in that one spot I labeled bad. They're out there with permission, but they're also out there essentially doing what? They're a safety valve for people who run ITI software and don't like Fiserv. They have an option. The worst option would be is that they hop over to a competitor, another dinosaur, so they keep them in the ecosystem by having a safety valve there in that bad spot. But it's only by permission, and basically if they ever wanted to pull that slot, it's gone in a heartbeat. So not my favorite spot to play in. There are two spots that I do like. One, of course, is way out in front of the dinosaur. This is nice because you get to cherry pick the customers, you get to often set the tone of the market, you get to set people's expectations, you get in there first, you make quick sales, and you're often seen as an innovator, which has two effects. It basically puts your company glowing light and helps support an aggressive price structure. That doesn't come for free, however. Being out in front, you're taking risks, of course. You have to act on limited information, and again, hopefully there's a couple of key customers feeding you data about what they need next, so you can reduce that risk. But you have to be out in front with a risk profile, and you also have to be willing to do some spend, especially in time, in terms of educating people not only why your product is great, but in terms of why does a product like yours exist in the first place. That's sometimes a more difficult scenario than others. I'm thinking of a software example here. Does anybody know what e-discovery software is? You guys heard that? So, okay. E-discovery basically is software that's sold at this point to corporations. Sometimes there's a legal firm involved in this. But basically it's a data retention software, and there's an element of archiving and an element of being able to search the software. Now, when this software started to get going, essentially a lot of companies looked at their own records and said, we're good. We're doing what the regulations want us to do, and the absolute minimum, nothing more. And so if you think of somebody who's in the e-discovery space trying to sell their software, who are they selling it to? They essentially have to create a need, a perception that your corporation is putting itself at risk. You have to create Basically, they have to look at where regulation should be going in the next 2 or 3 years and tell companies that you have to hit these targets in a few years. There's all of these educational components that the early adopters within e-discovery had to go over. And it meant, longer sales cycles and sometimes a lot more work spent developing things like white papers, YouTube videos, and a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily have to do if you were already sitting in there with many competitors. So again, there's a price to be out in front, and very often it's worth paying. Now in back, your job is sometimes somewhat easier in figuring out what customers want. One of the things that, let me point out what being in back means first of all. When you're in back, this means that the dinosaurs have passed through, the vegetation is starting to grow, and the business analogy here is that you're looking for people who are unsatisfied with what the dinosaurs offer. In fact, the dinosaurs' existing customers are very often your target market. So to identify what they want, sure enough, remember I said at the top, you need disgruntled customers. Go to the disgruntled customer forum, find out what they want, build the solution. That's actually the easy part about living back there. The tricky part is actually providing those people enough incentive to move, to quit complaining and actually stake their business on your particular solution. And so there's a couple of things you need to be very careful of when you're in that last position. That's making sure that your on-ramps are absolutely frictionless, that you can walk up to the company and say, there will be zero risk if you transition. We'll be able to do this without you having to add additional staff, and it may or may not cost more. The may or may not cost more is the interesting part, because cost may be a driver, or it may be really feature functionality. And if you think, for example, of some of the high-end audio, some of the high-end video software that's out there, let's say for studio work, some of that stuff exists in a market where they've taken a look at what's on the market. They've looked at the dinosaurs in that particular market and they said, this isn't good enough, this is costing me productivity in terms of valuable engineering or something else. So your cost may be higher, your cost may be lower, or I should say your pricing might be higher, might be lower than the dinosaurs in the market. It depends. All right. I threw a lot at you in a very short period of time here. Any questions or comments to date on this so far? Good? Okay.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
It would seem like most of it, where you've gone so far, is kind of a business-to-business kind of approach. Is that correct, or does it also, is there a model of this for the end user?
I'll be perfectly honest, most of my experience with business-to-business computer sales. In terms of the adoption curve, it's shrunk in many ways for the consumer market. And so you have less time to move before the dinosaur notices that they're there. There's also many times in the consumer market, because there's the proverbial, let's say 250 million or in the United States, or you start to look internationally, you have all these millions of customers, and so potentially you have a lot more competitors right off the bat if you're basically aiming for a widespread consumer market. So in general, I've been more comfortable, at least in my career, basically hanging around the business market where there's some established processes, there's some established players in each market, and I basically triangulate where I want to live within a specific industry.
Great.
So that's a good caveat to have from the beginning. I'm mostly a business-to-business guy. All right. Want to take a quick look here at eating with dinosaurs. They are fortunately messy eaters, and they miss a lot of stuff. And again, remember, if you're out in front, you can cherry pick the good stuff out of their food before they munch on it. Remember, they're messy eaters. A lot of stuff falls out of their mouth. A lot of their stuff that they try to eat doesn't quite get digested. And all of that creates opportunities for you if you're well positioned. All right, who's seen something like this before? I hope this is everybody. This is the proverbial sales funnel, or essentially how dinosaurs, and in fact how all of us, go ahead, digest identified prospects and bring them through to close sales. Who's heard the term ADA around marketing, folks? Okay, it's not just because a couple of us have been to Boston, but basically that stands for something, and I apologize, this isn't coming out very well on the projection here. But basically, there's about 4 standard stages that when you get in a room with marketing folks, they may talk about. There's essentially way out here is the awareness phase. This basically indicates that somebody who's looking for a solution might think to look at you for a possible solution. You move down the funnel and you hit different milestones. An interest level might be somebody who thinks that you may actually have a viable solution for their particular situation. You go down a little further in the decision area, you're talking about people who might decide to try your solution, do a proof of concept, and basically move all the way to the desired action, which of course in this case would be eventual sale. Now you could, and in fact you probably should, have your own sales funnels with specific milestones, but I'm just going to leave this one up here because this is basically how you can look at the world in one way. All right, the next thing I want to look at, the screen's not quite wide enough here. Okay, everybody's got a sales funnel. Everybody has to digest this stuff. Let's look at the Dinosaur sales funnels versus your sales funnels. And the first thing you're going to notice here, and it's quite intentional here, is that way out here in awareness, this is finding people who even know that you exist. They have a lot more resources to throw out there in the market. They can do things, and they typically are involved in promotions that you may not necessarily be able to afford with your current marketing budget. And I'm trying to think of some of the ones that we had when I was looking at multi-million-dollar marketing budgets out there. There was event sponsorships. They might actually host entire conferences. They'd have hosted sessions. They would pay for placements in trade journals. We actually paid analysts to come and take a look at our product, and then we basically pay for analyst coverage in one way or another. There are a number of different things that you could do. What else am I out here? Press releases. What else? Trinkets. Those are good. Print ads, and one of the other things I thought I heard mentioned earlier today was store front space within places like Best Buy. Basically, just all these different places where you can get out and expose the brand. Places that doesn't necessarily lead you directly down the sales funnel, but make sure that when people think they want the solution, that they have you in mind somewhere. What you can do here is a couple of interesting things. Yeah, you have to be able to steal some of this. You have to be able to essentially eat their lunch. I'm going with a digestion example, and hopefully everybody here is still working through lunch okay too. But there's a number of different things you can do at every single stage of the sales funnel to either ride on top of advertising, the hard work that they've invested, or to actually know where people are in your competitors' sales funnels and steal them back to you. And that, of course, makes this fatter than it should be, and that fatter than it should be, and even with the same conversion rates, it leads to higher sales. So let's start with some of the things that we can do basically in the awareness side. This is making sure that people even know that you exist. Now, there's actually a couple we can take right out of the bag of the Dinosaurs. One of them would be press releases. Again, when I was with larger marketing departments, we would actually have people who were basically just concentrating on just PR itself. But press releases are easy to write. They're easy to get out there. What's nice about them is once they're out there, they typically bounce around among site aggregators, and so you get wonderful little SEO links back to your own site. And they're basically just a cheap and easy way to get your name out there and constant things. The other thing with press releases that you can do, and I think we talked a little bit about this morning with some of the integrated marketing things, is that you can sprinkle bigger names or other things people are interested in your press releases. This is something I do constantly. For example, one of the things you can do with our product is you can pull up an iPad and you can go in and you can administer the system. And so our press releases don't necessarily lead with serve you or an FTP server necessarily. It's basically a lot of our press releases go out there with iPad this, iPad that, and that just gets picked up by sites left and right who are looking to aggregate this hot new news. It's really easy to do. Another one that I like, of course, is it's cheap and free, is the trinkets. And the reason for the trinkets, and that I like those even for a company with limited marketing budget, is that if you have nothing else to hand to somebody when you're having a conversation, hand them a trinket. In fact, I've got a couple along with me, just in case you wanted to see some of those. But those things, of course, are basically in the space of the traditional dinosaurs and how they're getting out to market. So if you just do that, again, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose badly. So you have to look at where you can essentially level the playing field. And what is so big for all of us right now in terms of leveling the playing field is essentially when customers are out there, they actively search for something. They're typing something in, they're following links. You have to be found in the various search areas. And when we talk about search, it's high time to think about the alternative search engines. Now, the number 2 search engine right now is what? How about YouTube? People fall right off of Google into YouTube, and the searches are so commingled that basically, if you're looking to get content out there, number 2 is not Bing, it's YouTube. So make sure you've got videos, make sure you've got content-appropriate titles. I steal this all the time. For example, when I post my videos out there, it's not necessarily, serve you FTP server managed by an iPad. It's basically managing an FTP server with an iPad. Drop the brand name because you just want somebody to come in and take a look at what you're doing. Something else out there where you can level the search. Think about directories. And one of the directories especially where a whole lot of consideration isn't paid to size of company. For example, we have listings in the Red Hat ISV catalog right now. When you do that, basically it's the same for any size company that you go in there. Our little company's got the same size ad there as a lot of our other competitors who might be 10 times as large as we are. So if you can level the playing field by finding catalogs, getting out there, those catalogs are then themselves searchable. There's another way to get up there. Another one to look at there is basically when people start to create entirely new markets. And this is particularly done by platform providers. And again, hopefully we're going to see a little bit about Windows 8 and the application store coming up. So when a new opportunity like that pops up, you have to jump on it. Because for a while there, you're going to have the advantage of a level playing field with everybody else, where potentially people are coming in and evaluating the tech or the screenshots and the demo more so than they are necessarily an established brand name. One last thing I'm going to put out there that's kind of along the platform pieces is basically taking a look at a lot of these ride-along opportunities. Again, when a platform provider comes out with a major new piece of the puzzle, again, Windows 8's coming out here, find out what those platform providers' marketing teams are doing and get noticed by them. They're looking for customer stories. They're looking for ISV success stories, basically, to go in, cooperate with them, and then you have their 100, 200, 300 person marketing team pushing that message out with your brand included. This is something I do constantly, and again, I've done these with Microsoft, VMware, and just a number of other organizations out there. They'll put these things out there. They're looking for live people. They're looking for people to appear in their videos and their press releases because they're as hungry for content as anybody else. All right, let's see. That's awareness, actually. There's a whole bunch of things you can do there. I'm going to tell you one more thing on awareness, actually. This one's one of my favorite ones. In my particular industry, we've actually had a little bit of on and off analyst coverage. Gartner, for example, has come in and written articles about who is the best so-and-so in our particular space. Our customer base doesn't necessarily read or subscribe to Gartner, which poses an interesting awareness opportunity for us. What we do in some cases is after Gartner will publish an MQ, Magic Quadrant or whatnot, we will get a copy of that and then write basically a critique of that and put that critique publicly out on the web, sort of hinging along how much content you can actually review that's in the article. We'll put the critique out there in a publicly available format. Search engines will pick that up. It'll become the number 2 or 3 entry if somebody does a search for that particular Gartner report. Now what happens then, especially with a paid report, is that people actually have to pay for the report. So people will hit that first link, they'll bounce off. They'll say, well, I'll try link 2. So we end up with more people sometimes reading the critique of the Gartner report that all of our competitors spent millions of dollars trying to get their name into, and then we'll get associated basically as a name that should be thought of when they look in this industry, basically riding right on the backs of everybody else who did the hard work for us. Brilliant. So it's kind of chippy, it's kind of evil. So you like Chippy, huh? There's more that you can do basically once you learn what's going on in their sales process. And this is where listening to your customers about when they knew it was time to buy your product was so incredibly difficult. You need to find out when they decided that your competitors were not going to cut it and basically bottle that and sell it. Well, for example, I had the wonderful fortune of working against a competitor once that basically had a sales automation thing that told them who to call back depending on their title. And so if they were a director or vice president, they'd get a call back in a day or two. If they were just a mere IT or development manager, they might get a junior sales guy in a week or two. If they were a tech guy, forget it, they would never get a call back. And so basically you have a competitor like that, you know that that's their standard operating procedure in the sales process. Anybody hits you in this process, you basically get back to them in a day or two. Provide a sales engineer, especially if somebody's technical on the line. Basically, look for those areas that you know that the competitors aren't covering, and then you just nail them when they're available. And very frequently, again, they're talking to your competitors already. They're in their sales process. They're in their sales funnel. There's an opportunity to sweep in and grab them. All right. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit faster now, now that we've gone through essentially the basics here. There's a number of things that you can do. We're going to look at some websites and look at a couple of other things here in a minute where people are basically deciding that they are in a market with competitors and types of different actions that they're taking, specifically to do one of two things. One is adjust the distance between them and the dinosaur. Either move forward, get out more in front into the educational piece of the market, picking up new prospects faster than the dinosaurs are, or essentially move back, make people aware that they're an alternative, something that people go to once their needs have grown up a little bit. The other thing that we're going to take a look at in the next few slides is basically adjusting your digestion, making sure that your sales funnel doesn't have unnatural constrictions and things that would affect you. Because, again, remember that great big maw of the dinosaur that you saw. They have lots of advertising dollars to spend on the awareness, which makes your sales conversion process that much more critical. It has to be efficient. Okay, so adjusting distance from dinosaurs. There's basically, again, two things here. One of the things you can do if you want to be out in front is you can provide more education in terms of what's going on. You have to be able also, and this may be new in this particular presentation, one of the fears you're going to have to address if you're out in front, or depending on how out in front you want to be, is that you have to address the fear that you are bringing a solution to market too soon, or that you're too small to provide that solution. And there's a few factors that play in there. I've heard a number of people specialize, for example, to a particular contracting industry or specific trucking industry or a few things like that. I bet you there are some dinosaur players out there, but I also bet that those players have remained so steady over the years that your customer base really has no reason to think that they would ever bring to market a competing product. So they're willing to buy now because their need is now. What can disrupt that, of course, is a dinosaur that decides it's going to start making noise and basically pre-publishing a roadmap or pre-publishing some sort of calendar that they're going to come in and make moves in the market. But if they do that, again, they're innovative and they may not be a dinosaur in the first place. On the back end, again, we talked about educating about alternative solutions. And again, it's very critical to have that frictionless road, or for frictionless on-ramp. So here we go. First one, this is just a quick thing. This is one of the first changes I made when I came to Rhinosoft here. We sell to a sub-segment of file transfer prospects who are looking for something called managed file transfer. And so what the company had done originally is they had set up a page here. Essentially it says, yeah, we do managed file transfer. We have this and this and this and this and this. That was a problem for me because in our particular market, managed file transfer is an extremely, extremely crowded space. And we were basically from the outset competing with some dinosaurs in that market, some established players, some people that basically had their marketing stuff down. So we made a conscious decision here that the only guys we're going to pick off this market here is those who are coming to it for the first time, basically some of the early adopters here. So we changed a few things up. We provided some screenshots. These are for the network guys so they know what to do. And then we put in a definition. Again, this is ripped right off of Gartner. We dropped in a definition of managed file transfer, a trusted third party in this case, which is good when you're doing the education piece, a trusted third party to tell everybody what they're looking for, and then of course if you were to scroll down to see more of this, you're actually going to see how we address those specific needs. So there's a piece where we took a conscious effort to adjust ourselves out in front of the dinosaurs. Here is another page that I stole. I think it's from Pardot, one of those two companies. It's basically an email marketing company. And you can see that they are sort of in an educational space here. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll just read this first part here. Let's see. This system could automatically send out emails based on time intervals, actions taken by prospects on your website, or other parameters. Which is kind of interesting to me because some people in the marketing circles, who would be the target customer base here, would see lead nurturing and drip marketing and already know that that's what they're talking about. So some of the language and some of the education efforts that they put forward here are interesting to me. This kind of tells me that they're looking for people who are coming to the market for the first time. There's something else here too. If you look way to the right, I don't know if you can see this, but feedback's not really a feedback. Feedback is a testimonial. This is something that's in there specifically to tell people that it's okay to buy now. We have a solid solution. You don't have to wait for a whole bunch of other competitors to come along and then pick one. People are really using our software now. So they're in early with the education piece, and they immediately have a little piece of testimonial to tell people that it's okay to start buying now. Let's look at the other end. Again, this might be back behind the dinosaur. Has anybody heard of a service called SurveyMonkey? Okay, so they're doing pretty well in their awareness. SurveyMonkey is basically an online service that allows you to post surveys. And they've attracted some interesting competitors. This is one of the competitors. And you can see, or actually there's two of them up here. There's two competitors here which are basically riding on top of the awareness that SurveyMonkey has developed on. There's an alternative up there, don't monkey around. That's only going to ring bells in your head if you know already who SurveyMonkey is. And both of these guys went the sort of cute and funny route. They're taking shots at the core company. And so this is nice little chippy stuff here. You wouldn't let a monkey design your website, so why let one design your surveys? I just love that stuff. So there you go. Someone's presenting alternatives, and they're doing it in a compelling way that makes you smile and brings you in.
Excuse me, is that a main landing page then?
Sort of. This is actually, I'm actually going to come back to this page. This is below the fold.
Oh.
But I'll show you what they do basically to pull people below the fold or basically hit their competitors without using their name. I want to get back to that. It's really cool. Here we go. This one, Microsoft example. Easy migration. This is a dated example, but it's still valid. In here, everybody remember when WordPerfect was big? And essentially, how many man years do you think it took Microsoft to get the conversion perfect from WordPerfect over to Word? Many? Decades? Who knows? How much?
We've never done it. Yeah.
It hasn't happened yet.
Boy, you are bitter. All right, here's what Microsoft has to say about that. One line. You can use the WordPerfect 5.x converter to convert WordPerfect 5.x documents to Office Word 2003. So, I don't know, 10 man years is summarized in one sentence. But really, from a prospect perspective, that's really all you want to hear. Oh, I got WordPerfect? Yeah, no problem. I'll just bring it into Word. Zero entry. Okay. And before I move on here, any quick questions about adjusting distance? No? Okay. The other thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is essentially, if you have dinosaurs operating in your space, understand that people have preconceptions of what they can and cannot do. You're going to have to work hard, very hard sometimes, basically to change those perceptions and tell people why you're better. And so there's the quick version, my competitor sucks. How do you do that nicely? How do you do that with the amount of subtlety that'll tell somebody that, again, you're not bitter, but really you're bringing a good solution to market here. And so we're going to take a look at a couple of the well-accepted ways that we can essentially put up that diagram without putting up that diagram. So three of the quick ones here are, develop some sort of a straw dog. And this is going to be basically a depiction of your competitor. It's a stereotype, in fact. It basically takes all of the attributes that you've heard people complain about them and put them in something that they can identify. We're going to look at some comparison charts. That's very frequently used. That's something you should always have, at least in your internal literature. If you don't necessarily put it on your website for people who come to you and say, I'm looking at X, Y, and Z. I need to know, why you're better. The answer can't be, well, I don't know. Or we're more innovative. I mean, they've already done some research on the other guys. You have to have some bullets here, basically, to say why we're better. Finally, there's going to be a little bit of sprinkling of some of these anti-dinosaur attributes. These are things that you would sprinkle through your literature here, basically for somebody who's reading through your stuff, so it hits on some of their preconceptions about why the dinosaur is bad. All right, let's get going here. All right, who has seen these guys? I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. This guy ever really exist? No, they basically just took all of the perceptions about PC, about Microsoft in particular, being corporate, wearing khakis to an event instead of jeans. I wonder who would do that. And basically just took them all and gave them a target so that they could compare themselves directly against them. This is valuable. This is something you should be considering when you're talking about dealing against the dinosaurs. Make the worst, ugliest representation of all of the dinosaur characteristics that you can, and then basically tear them apart. Doesn't have to be competitor specific. Again, Microsoft, never mentioned. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. Does that guy run Linux? I don't think so. Okay. Comparison charts. You've seen these things all over the place, and here's one that we use basically in terms of our selling. We deal with a couple of competitors who are about 5 to 10 times as large as we are every single day. Wonderful companies. We've got Ipswich out there. We've got Globalscape out there. And so, one of the things that we have to do to basically make it known to our customers that we're out there and viable is, go take a look at their release notes. Have they actually released anything in the last 2 years? Go take a look at our release notes. Go take a look at their interface. Do they even know what the Microsoft ribbon is? Come look at our interface. Do they know? Have they bothered to make it native to Windows 7 with 64-bit? Basically just calling out the attributes, which are going to call out why you need to leave the dinosaurs in the dust. Here's another example from somebody who wrote an IM client. And again, this is very hard to see, I apologize, but columns 2 is Pigeon, and column 4 is Trillium Pro. I don't know how many people have a little desktop IM thing going. Those two are extremely popular. They are essentially in the minority position trying to say why they are viable in a market with some larger competitors, at least in terms of mind share. And so again, JBuddy Messenger, whatever that is, happens to have the green check marks down the left-hand side. So everybody's seen these. Again, you may or may not want to put it on your website, but you definitely need to have it in the literature so that you can speak intelligent to it when it is appropriate. All right, going to step a little bit outside the software industry. I couldn't find the exact example I wanted to here, but let's take a look at finding some attributes of dinosaurs that everybody understands are elements of dinosaurs. So we're in the banking industry again here. Big banks are losing customers to smaller banks based on two things, according to a trusted third party, J.D. Power in this particular case. They're switching because high fees from the large banks, and they're switching because of poor service. So, well-known attributes. I don't think I'm making anything up here. So let's take a look at a bank, and this is actually one of the banks I use, who's capitalized on this. And so in their literature, they come to the home of what? Free, that no fees. And in fact, the next ad right next to it says no fees. And so they've done care here, basically to position themselves as an alternative. In this case, a dinosaur follower, somebody who's providing an alternative to the dinosaur's existing customers and providing them an incentive to pick up and move. All right, here's one that's more in your face. And again, this is one that you use with care. In one of my previous lives, I had a consulting firm where I would essentially do strategic migration projects from one piece of enterprise software to another piece of enterprise software. And the one that I loved to peel away from was something called Sterling Commerce here. And so I wrote a very, very chippy ad here, basically saying, dealing with your Sterling Commerce renewal. And it goes down the list and essentially goes through the experience a lot of people would have. They get this, $10,000, $100,000 renewal every year, for the enterprise software, and they immediately start calling people and say, get this thing out of here, get this thing out of here now. But it didn't happen. And so in this particular case, I'm hitting on some of the keywords, I'm hitting on some of the core experiences here, but I basically back off from some of the chippiness here right away here around, don't build Rome in a day. Basically, now what? And so some of these things, if you're taking a particular hostile customer, which is in fact what I wrote this thing for, you're basically walking them down a path where they see you not as somebody who can just sit around in a bar somewhere and complain about high software costs. You actually can build yourself into somebody who can say, okay, calm down, there's things we can do. It's going to take a little bit, but there's things we can do. And so there's a few ways that you can essentially take attributes of Dinosaurs and walk customers with you as long as you start off where they're coming from and then walk them down a rational path. All right, last big section of things I want to look at here has to do with improving some of the digestion in your own sales funnels. Now these are, everybody here's got a website, so that would be a stupid question, but how many people basically take their spouses and their relatives and everybody else who wonders what you do all day, take them to your website and say, do you know what's going on here? It can be an enlightening experience. Now this is something I do with my poor wife every single time I switch jobs. I bring them out to the website and I say, what do you think we do? Who are our customers? And so sometimes you get some interesting answers out of that thing. Basically, obviously the introductory marketing has to be simple enough that everybody knows where you're going with it. Some things you can do with increasing engagement during the interest period. I'm going to go very light on this because there's a lot of other speakers who are covering this territory. And then the last thing I just want to take a quick look at is some of what people are doing to essentially steal their customers' prospects with some of the marketing that they're doing. So first thing is removing stones here. This is actually a shot of one of our catalog pages when I got there a couple months back. And essentially, this is where we're starting from here. Why do I say there's stones in the process? I mean, look at all the extra icons here. You've got Windows icons, you've got Linux icons, you have flashy icons here for some sort of bundle. You've got basically a mix in terms of our product logos and everything else. And so it becomes visually distracting as to what the person who landed on this page is actually supposed to do, which is add choice A to the cart or add choice B to the cart. Easy to remove stones. And actually, here's a quick little plug for two of the books that I like a lot. Have you guys taken a look at these in your applications? So there's two. Basically, I'd call this one a beginner book, Don't Make Me Think, which basically talks about streamlining, especially an application experience for your end users. And then there's another one that I really like over there called GUI Bloopers, which essentially builds on that thing and basically said, why are sometimes checkboxes the wrong thing to use in a particular situation? It's more of an advanced look at some of the controls and how they actually participate in usability. But the same books that you use and the same approach you use for your applications themselves can also be applied to your website. And so again, here's a discipline, here's a piece of intelligence you can basically build into the way you look at the world, and you can apply it to your applications, you can apply it to your website. And again, as per some of the SaaS pitches that we've been hearing today, the line between your website and your application is going to continue to get a little blurry over the years. So, sir, back to your favorite thing with the monkey. This is their page. This is what you see above the fold when you pull up this wonderful site called Pop Survey. And in fact, I am enthralled by this particular site at the moment. The dig at their competitor is hard to see above the fold here. But if you know who it is, if you're looking at SurveyMonkey, you're going to see that image of the monkey down there on the right-hand corner and say, what the heck? Scroll down, and that's where the dig, the one that I showed you guys earlier, that's where the dig against the competitor comes in. Other things that I like about this one, they're essentially establishing themselves as an alternative. You look up at the top, send. They're not trying to push the concept of, hey, the web is here, you can now create custom surveys and send them. They're saying, send better surveys. They know that you've been out there looking at their competition. They want you, and they want you because they're going to create more beautiful surveys. How do you know they're more beautiful? Again, right on the home page it says, try this out. And another thing I love about this page is they don't need a separate box here for a customer testimonial. Virgin is their customer. And it's right there. There's the testimonial. So I love this particular site. I think it actually plays well into the types of things about competing with the established players, in this case SurveyMonkey. Pop Survey is an up-and-comer. I think this one plays very well. This is a nice example of a couple of those things on one site. Pardon me, my little pointer's missing. Okay, increased engagement. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this thing. This has very much to do with so-called drip marketing campaigns. I definitely want to encourage that. Once somebody has entered your funnel, from an efficiency point of view, don't let them leave. And so know where they are in your funnel. Be able to send different messages to them where they are in your funnel. If they're way out the awareness thing, send them a newsletter that talks about some of the solutions you've done in general. If they're a little further down the newsletter, send them information that tells them how you might be able to solve their specific things and how to start conversations with your sales engineers, salespeople, yourself. Again, I'm going a little business to business on that one, but good to do. Like I said, less than a minute on that one. All right, stealing prospects here. One of my favorite ways essentially to interrupt the sales process of a competitor is basically show up with a pre-built checklist. Again, business to business world, this might be essentially an RFP template or an RFI template. Something that basically takes away the work from the perspective of your buyer of actually having to figure out what do I want in the solution. They download their checklist. Of course, your checklist is pre-built to favor you, of course. But you're also basically providing them with a free service. I mean, even if they go out and they end up buying from a Dinosaur, because many of these folks are going to have to because of corporate restrictions or whatnot. If they end up buying from a Dinosaur, you've still provided them a free service. They're still going to think good of you. They still may refer you to their friends and other people who may not be subject to the same restrictions. Say, if you're looking for this, I bought from these guys because X, Y, and Z, but I also don't think you should go to this site and pick up this checklist and make your own decisions. So it's another way to get in and interrupt their process by basically setting the criteria of evaluation of all the products that people are looking at. And here's another interesting one. This one caught my eye because this is, I'm not exactly sure why there's an alternative to the PDF reader, but this is one. I know that they are basically, they're in there, this is as a trailing product. This is an alternative. Basically what they're doing here is they're calling out in a couple of places, they're an alternative to Adobe Reader. So again, remember, as an alternative solution here. There really is no entry ramp to start viewing PDFs. You just have to start browsing to them. So they have that one linked. And one of the things I thought was interesting here is here's a little software review. You're going to have those hopefully for all of your software somewhere. I apologize, this one's not too legible up here, but basically there's a planted review on this thing, and I can kind of tell this is a planted review from a sales and marketing perspective because normal people don't say a couple of caveats before I start the review. That's something that those of us in the sales and marketing world do because we know we have your attention, and we're going to pitch you on something while we have your attention before we answer your question. That's what that's essentially doing. Number one review, great piece of software, a couple of caveats before I start the review. And then it actually mentions another competitor by name in there, or Foxit Reader, and it says, I used to be a big fan of Foxit Reader. So it positions them essentially as some sort of inferior piece of software for whatever reason. I've never even heard of this thing before I pulled it up and dropped it in the presentation last night. But basically they are doing some specific positioning with regard to their competitors just in a review and basically a fake review that one of their employees or surrogates wrote in. Well, I thank you very much for listening to me for an hour here. Talk a little bit about how to behave around a dinosaur, especially how to identify those dinosaurs you should be dancing around. And hopefully you picked up a tip or two about how to improve your own digestion, how to warn the other people in the market that those dinosaurs are out there, and specifically how to adjust the distance that you are from the dinosaurs so you don't get trampled.